Change is around us every day. So how do you manage the change that happens in mining year round? Welcome to another episode of Change Itself. So today we've got Gus Miner and Eric Demers who sit down with Thomas Hahn to discuss the importance of change and how Turner Mining Group tackles some of these changes. The show is brought to you by Sophie and Technica Mining and is produced by Crownsman Partners. Now, here are your hosts, Gus and Eric.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Change Itself. We're here with Eric Demers and myself, Gus Miner. We've got episode 2. So last time we got to enjoy the icebreaker episode 1, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And we appreciate that you're along the journey with us. There's certainly a lot of conversation to be had around change. And what's exciting about today's episode is we've got a special guest. We've got Thomas Hahn from the Turner Mining Group that's joining us for a great conversation around what's been going on there. Stick around. It's going to be an action-packed and information-packed episode. Eric, how has things been since our last touch point?
Very good. Got a couple books in. One you recommended. We had Your Next 5 Moves, which was quite interesting and a real eye-opener. And I was driving to Quebec and had to pull over and really think about some of the things that were said. It was awesome. And then I've started into Future is Faster Than You Think now. That one's a fantastic book. Really get the brain turning. So it's awesome. Yourself?
Very good. Very good. Now, I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed Your Next 5 Moves. I know I'm a big fan of it. I really enjoyed that one as well. Like we talked about, I normally go pretty crazy on the Audible books. And then once I have ones that I really like, then I buy the hardcover so I can do a lot of note taking and reminiscing on what I've learned. So that I can learn from what I've heard and learn from what I've read and keep going forward. So I appreciate that you share that feedback. And there's the way that I see it, there's never a single moment wasted when you're learning something new, especially from people that have done it before and took the time to put it in copy. It really pays dividends in the long run. So also very fun very interesting to learn that you took the time to pull over, be safe about it, jot down some notes, make sure that your mind was on task. Because that's the one thing about those Audible books sometimes is that sometimes you're driving and you forget that you're driving because you're lost in thought and you're deep thinking. And then you're like, oh, wait, hold on. I'm actually in control of a vessel here.
Yeah.
Things can get out of hand. So great point there. Great point. No, I've been on a similar journey. So it's fun. We've had a lot of great feedback from our first episode, which I think we shared with you. But have you had anybody reach out to you and ask more about what's going on with Change Itself and how episode 1 was?
Yeah, I've had a few people make comments. Probably still friends and families at this point, it's awesome. Never thought we'd be doing a podcast. Like I said in the first episode, we share stories and conversations all the time, and it's fun to be able to share with other people. Yourself?
No, for sure. I mean, that's the thing is that, and then what's interesting with friends and family is that for the most part, friends and family know you're working and that you're up to some cool stuff, but they have no clue what you're really doing. So to be able to shed some light on that for friends and family is really exciting. And you get a lot of feedback from that. And they're like, oh, that's what you guys are doing. That's pretty cool. And at the same time, I did get quite a bit of outreach as far as, possible topics and possible guests. And now we're looking into booking into February, March next year. So I think we're going to be here to stay, which is really interesting.
That's awesome. Also, one of the great feedbacks that we got, it's a little segment we're going to try on later. It's an introduction to some new technologies. So there's a couple pretty cool things that we've demoed in the last, couple weeks, and excited to share with you.
Yeah, for sure. And then hopefully a lot of people can learn along the way. So right on. So we're not going to hold up our guest much longer, and we know everybody's time is very valuable, and we're really appreciative that Thomas has been able to graciously accept our this opportunity to talk with us. What's funny is that I got introduced with Keaton and Thomas through an interview that Keaton did with the Crownsman Show about their story at Turner Mining Group. And, we've had a lot of great conversations since then, and really excited to dive in deeper with what's going on. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Thanks, Gus. Thanks, Eric, for having me. Looking forward to today. It'll be fun.
Right on. No, thanks for coming on board. So what's new and exciting? I know I've been reading a lot of things about Turner Mining and a lot of movement, and with everything that's going on lately, with all the adjustments and all of the competition for time that COVID has presented us, right? Like there's change initiatives, and then there's change initiatives while dealing with a change initiative called COVID.
Oh yeah, plenty. We've been busy. Not surprising. Keaton and I tend to never stay still. That's why I love the kind of whole theme of this being change itself. I mean, I think if COVID hasn't introduced that, I don't know what will. But we've been busy, focusing a lot internally. We've done a lot. We opened up a new office actually out in Salt Lake City. So Keaton and I are based on the eastern half of the U.S. Built a whole team out there. It's great. It's in the heart of what is the true mining sector, right? And so we've been enjoying it and having a lot of fun out there, getting to build that team kind of from the ground up. So that's always exciting.
Did you guys set up your office similar to what I've heard about in the podcast, where everybody's nice and tight there too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So our office in Indiana is that way. It's a kind of all glass office, really kind of a no secrets mentality. And then in Salt Lake City, or just south of Salt Lake City, we did the exact same thing. So kind of a big bullpen area where the team gets to work cohesively. And then a couple conference rooms where you could have kind of some focused meeting time. But no, it's we purposely design it that way. We want everybody interacting, want everybody feeling not only what they're doing, but frankly, feeling empowered to help other people on the team. We're a big believer in books too. And there's a book called The Power of TED that we've had our whole staff read. Okay. And really the focus of that book is in an environment where, context matters, change matters. There's a dynamic element kind of behind everything. You can personally approach things in kind of one of two ways. You can either be a victim to the change that's happening around you, or you can be a creator who's actually focused on trying to find the opportunity inside of that change. And that's really kind of the theme of the book. And it's one of the reasons why we like teaming our folks together, because they can look at all the things that are going on in our business and they can find ways for them to create, for them to jump in, for them to add that extra value. And so, set up the office same way as we did here in Indiana.
Nice.
Very cool. And I guess I was reading as well is that you've, I guess the new office is where it's in the areas of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, so it's just south of Salt Lake proper. It's still in the Salt Lake Valley. It's in a town called South Jordan, which is literally about 20 minutes south of Salt Lake City proper. But in the valley, very much a suburb of Salt Lake City. There's kind of all kinds of other mining related firms, engineering firms, et cetera, that are in that area. So it's a good place for us to be based out west. And then as you guys know, Salt Lake is kind of in the middle from a geography perspective of the U.S.'s western mining region. You kind of get north up into Montana and Idaho and kind of that area. You get west into Nevada, you get south into Arizona, and you get east into Colorado. So it was strategically chosen or purposefully chosen because of that. And we have a lot of operations that kind of encircle that area.
Yeah, no, it certainly is a great spot. I mean, when I heard about the location, I was like, you know what, that's a good spot. To your point, you can kind of essentially go wherever you need to go and relatively travel roughly the same kind of distance, whatever direction you need to go. So it's a great spot. Now, one of the things that I was reading on as well is that you've actually expanded on your service model in the process, right?
Absolutely. So if you think about our company, we're only 4 years old. Right. And so we have purposely tried to learn kind of along our journey. And so when you think about the offerings into the mining sector as a services company, right, we don't own any resources. We work for the resource owner. And so that can take several different kind of stages along the way. Obviously, the first is you get everything ready for the owner to mine themselves. And so when we started the company, we did a lot of what I would call preparatory work. But along the way, we've racked up skills and kind of amassed this team where now we can go end to end. So we'll actually set everything up literally from a greenfield site, which we're doing today, all the way into the mining campaign, right? The actual mining of whatever resource it is that the owner's trying to extract. But then we'll also take that all the way through into reclamation and returning the land to another purpose. So we have projects that now span kind of that spectrum, if you will. But yes, that's been an intentional shift for us to bring the right personnel on board, kind of acquire the right partners and resource owners, such that we can now demonstrate those skills kind of along that life cycle, if you will, of a given mine.
So from your other podcasts, you guys don't shy away from, some tough and controversial things sometimes. What are some challenges you guys faced throughout this change?
Oh, yeah. The reality is when we talk about life cycle of a mine, there's different skills that are needed to do the prep work, to do the mining work, to do the reclamation work. You could also think of our company as going along a life cycle. Another big book that we believe in, there's a book called Corporate Life Cycles. And it basically compares a company to a human being. So, when it's first created, you're an infant, right? You're just trying to basically survive. After that, you become a kid, right? And you're very energetic and you're trying lots of things. And then you're an adolescent, right? And you're moody and you're going through change and kind of all of these things. And that's frankly where Turner Mining Group is right now. We're very much in an adolescent phase. It takes a lot of people being willing to go through that change. So what I would say is, it's one of the reasons why I mentioned that first book. We want people on our team who want to create out of that change. And then kind of the next phase, the phase that we're headed into, is what, we would all call adulthood or your prime years. And in the book, they actually call it prime. And so we are very much focused on getting to prime, but it takes a lot of people on the team who understand what that takes, who understand the change that is required to make that happen. And so our focus has been that. But yeah, I would say, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, Keaton and I have spent a lot of time focusing internally kind of in this phase of the company. And we know that it's our team that is going to make this happen. If Keaton and I try to pretend to, kind of do everything or make every decision or everything like that, our company won't get to prime, right? We'll be the biggest limitations on the business. And that's something that we need to be conscious to not do. And it's why we spend a lot of time coaching and educating and providing resources to our team. But it's not easy. I will say that. We've had folks leave because they want to work for a smaller firm, right? They don't want to go kind of take on the challenges that come to the scale that we're headed towards. We've had folks join the team from larger companies, right? And they say, well, why don't you have this yet? And we say, give us a little bit of time. We're working on it. So it's definitely that adolescent phase where we're not everywhere we want to be, and we're absolutely not where we used to be. And so that takes a special person to be willing to take that on. And we're very fortunate that we feel like we have the right people on the bus to make it happen.
Nice. That's great. And like one of the things that I recognized from what you're talking to as far as where you're at now, when it comes to systems, right? One of the things that I've learned along the way, and then I've been mentored this way, and I've learned this way, and I'm now currently living this as well, being in your organization with Sophie, is that the system that was in place to support year one is different than the system that's in place to support year two. It's different than the system that's, so you're never ending the change, and you may be sticking with the same system, but you're evolving it, you're improving it, you're advancing it. And what I find is that sometimes you find some really, really key people to come and help out, which have been married to their mature systems for so long that then it although the experience is there and the thought process is there and everything's there, they're still very much engaged in their old systems, and releasing a system to adopt a new system is always a challenge, whether you're coming from a realm of experience or from a realm of unexperience.
Oh yeah.
It's always been that. So how have you been doing on that regard, as far as not only introducing new systems to implement the forward movement, but also coming to terms that you have to release some of what you've been built? You're kind of like destroying what you build every year. Every year you're kind of destroying what's there to put what's new, as well as bringing in the feedback from what's existing somewhere else, from the experience of people coming in saying, well, we do this way somewhere else. However, you're trying to be different and do things differently. So what's been done somewhere else is a good learning, but you don't necessarily want to absorb it into what your systems are. What's that been like for you guys?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, right? I think the first thing to recognize is anytime you're implementing any system, it's a lot. It's a lot to bite off. And so very rarely do they go perfectly smoothly. Very rarely does everybody understand kind of the context and the why behind a change, especially from a systems or a process perspective. You were filling out Form A yesterday. We need you to fill out Form B today. And so we do a lot of communication. I think both Keaton and I are pretty good communicators naturally. But we've also focused a lot on doing that inside of the organization, not just talking about the change from Form A to Form B, but talking about the why behind the change from Form A to Form B, what that's going to give, kind of what we're asking of that individual. What are they going to get in return for making that change? So I would say systems are ever evolving, because I think you're absolutely spot on with that comment. If I think about the software we used when I joined in 2018 and the software and the systems we use now in 2021 and what we're going to use in 2022 and beyond, I mean, they're just a different ballpark. And partly that's because we feel the pull towards that. Our clients are asking for more. We're not just doing preparatory work. We're doing oftentimes supply chain critical work for their business now. And when you're doing that, there's a different level of expectation. That client wants a different level of visibility and intimacy with you as their partner. So I think it is this constant evolution, if you will. We are always looking for a way to work smarter than maybe the way we have worked historically. And so that comes with the systems element, comes with the technology element, comes with a process element and an education element. But I think, again, it all comes down to communication. If you're not communicating effectively, I don't care how good the technology is, it likely won't get used, and therefore you won't get the value out of it.
One of the things I keep kind of themes in what I'm hearing from you, Thomas, is some very deliberate like actions and ways of doing it. Is that something you guys focus on? Like you're talking about communication, you guys are strong on communication. There's something sort of, it's slipping my mind now, but we were talking earlier, and it's really been, this deliberate, you're deliberately letting, you're teaching about context, you're deliberately teaching or communicating about change. Is that something you guys focus on?
Yeah. And I will say this is learned. It is not something that we were doing naturally before. Again, Keaton and I have our tendencies, but Keaton and I had a heart-to-heart this is probably pre-COVID now, probably like end of 2019. And we started talking about us, both Keaton and myself, being the biggest limiting factors on the company. And when you have that awareness to say, hey, look, I know I'm short in this area, and this area, and I need to either A, get better at those things, or B, bring somebody in who can actually do them more effectively than me. I think that's where the kind of genesis of that was. We don't have the ego to say that we really can solve all of our problems organizationally. And when you make that shift, two things happen. One, you have to find ways to invest in yourself. So Keaton and I have gone through a 52-week leadership program really this kind of deep integral way of thinking about leadership. And that wasn't an inexpensive effort, right? Both from the cost of signing up for a program like that, but more importantly, from the time investment. Keaton and I were spending probably 10 to 15% of our time for an entire year just focused on getting better ourselves. And then, so there's that investment. And then what we've done is we've taken that and now we're trying to invest in our team. So a lot of the tools and tricks and books and frameworks that we were able to absorb out of that program, we are now trying to implement into our next level of leadership in the organization. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there is an intentionality. A lot of people ask me what I do on a daily basis, and I say nothing. And, I mean, in a lot of ways, I could argue that that's the case, right? But what Keaton and I are focused on is what's the next step we need to take, and what's the step after that, and maybe even the step after that. And so when we're always focused on where the business is going, there is an intentionality. We get together on a regular basis just for that time. Actually, every 3 weeks, we carve out at least half a day just to focus on that so that we can pull ourselves up out of the day-to-day. And I think that's what leaders of an organization have to do. The reality is there is the tyranny of the urgent. Yep. Nothing goes smoothly, or nothing goes as smoothly as I guess you would like it to go. And so there's always something you can focus on. Being conscious of taking that time to look ahead and pull yourself out of the day-to-day is something that I helped institute as soon as I came inside the business. And we've been diligent about that the entire time. So it's taken different formats, and again, a lot of learning, but I think there is an intentionality behind what we are doing. And I think there also needs to be an intentionality about what you're asking, of your team. Asking our team to sit in a meeting that looks 2 years out, I don't think is actually a constructive thing, because now we're distracting our team from things that need to happen in the next 3 months, 6 months. And those are a priority, because the 2-year stuff doesn't happen without that. Right. And so I think there's an intentionality of who is doing what, and there's an intentionality of how we are going to get there. Then I think that's how good leaders and frankly, good businesses are run.
And it's such a difficult balance, right? Because your team will challenge you based on their emotion, or they'll challenge you based on their standpoint. So sometimes, like I got that question all the time, saying, well, if you know that in 5 years you want to do this, why aren't you talking about it today? Because it might affect how we think. And I said, that's probably why I'm not saying it, because it'll affect how you think. And ultimately, if everybody's focused on 5 years, who's taking care of today?
Exactly.
So you do need that balance. And then I completely agree with what you're saying. And I could see that. And one of the, so there's one of the books that I read, and I forget which one, because I've been through so many lately. I think I did over 20 books this year already, but one of them said, your greatest marketing strategy is your internal marketing strategy. Oh, yeah. And when they asked the question about what is the detailed framework for your external marketing, everybody can whip it out and say, this is what we're doing on social media. This is what our website looks like. This is what we tell our clients. These are all the brochures, the pamphlets, whatever media you put in place to sell your clients. And then you say, what is your internal strategy? Well, they're already hired, so we just keep moving forward. Well, if your client knows more about the future of your organization than your people, you're likely going to have a barrier to cross there, is what I'm assuming, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. We were talking a little bit before we got on as well about Keaton and I do a podcast, or Turner Mining Group does a podcast under the banner of Turner Mining Live. And in that podcast, it has evolved. We've always talked about that podcast actually having two very important audiences. One of them is internal, right? And so when we think about how do we scale communication to an organization that's spread out all over the country in different time zones, that want to hear what's top of mind to the founder of the company, that's what that podcast is for, or one of the reasons that podcast exists. It's another reason why we decided to put it on Instagram Live as well. And we do it late in the evening so that we can pick up both our East Coast folks and our West Coast folks when they're off work, and they can, watch and chime in. And we oftentimes have employees who want to join with us and ask us a couple questions. And so we let them on. And so I think you're right, Gus. If the only messaging you are doing is external, I often think you're actually leaving out probably your number one audience. There's these different frameworks of how to think about a business, and, customers pay the bills. Well, sure, but the customer's experience is going to be pretty bad if your employees aren't bought into where you're going and what you're doing, right? And so oftentimes you can think of your own organization as audience number one, almost because they're a prerequisite to audience number two. So sales is the lifeblood of a company, and you absolutely have to be doing the work for your clients. But the reality is the work will get done pretty poorly if you don't have the right organization going after it. And it's why, back to the systems thing, I mean, we spend a lot of time intentionally communicating, because, again, trying to implement a system or trying to make a customer happy without the right employees doing it, it's just going to fail.
Every worker deserves to go home safely at the end of every day. Book a demo with Sophie to discover how their groundbreaking EHS management software empowers workers to proactively avoid hazards, and how organizations like yours can cultivate a stronger work culture. Visit them at sophie.com to learn more. Technica Mining is a premier underground mining and construction contractor. They stand for delivering quality project work on time and on budget through innovative thinking. Their excellent safety record, experienced workforce, and large equipment fleet will guarantee the timely completion of all your project needs. Trusted by the world's leading mining companies, Technica Mining has over 20 years of experience in mine construction, development, and production. Contact Technica Mining to take your next mining project to the next level. Visit technicamining.com to learn more. Change Itself is produced by Crownsman, the voice of industry. Check out more, including The Crownsman Show, Mining Now, Crownsman Energy, and Crownsman Ag at crownsman.com.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we made a promise to our audience as well is to make sure that we don't have 2-hour podcasts. And I can tell that with the conversations that we've ignited here, and even just I've been a big fan of your content as well. We can likely spend a whole day workshopping things that are happening, and I really appreciate the feedback. Well, one of the segments that we wanted to bring on to our show is talking about new technologies, new things that may be changing the game for us long term. And I don't know how much R&D you guys do as far as new technologies and things that you can consider for the long term plan. But Eric and I have been talking about some of the stuff that we can probably start looking at for adding value 5 years from now, 7 years from now, or shorter term, 2 years from now.
Oh, yeah.
And we've come across a couple things. So
we spent some time there. Again, I wouldn't say we try to distract our organization from what needs to be done today and kind of tomorrow focused on that. But we absolutely spent some time there. I'm interested to hear what you got, what's kind of caught your guys' radar, because I'd love the inside scoop. So
yeah, Eric, you want to expand a little bit on some of the stuff we've seen?
Yeah, one of the interesting technologies I've seen in the last little bit was a company that does body cams. I'd never considered body cameras worn for any purpose other than policing, because that's all you hear about. Police forces got to wear body cams. And so when they contact me to book a demo and consider a beta test to see what kind of use cases it could be in mining. And then I started thinking about it, skills improvement, training, just quality control, all those things are there and it's possible. So even diving into one of those and implementing one of those case studies, I feel like you kind of got to pick one of those segments and just go try it, because it's overwhelming the amount of different things we could do. That's one of them. Thomas, have you heard of those?
Definitely familiar with the concept. I'm curious, is it supposed to be live and interactive, or is this something where it's recording and then afterwards you're kind of getting the training?
The one I've seen is it's not interactive, so it's recording, and then they store it as kind of evidence. I don't want to give away too much of their stuff, but then you can go back and review it. And a lot, like you can blur out, because I know privacy is a big thing for people. You can blur faces out, you can blur different things out. But like, I think about like a professional athlete, they're studying themselves all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't do it at work. It would kind of be cool to, get a perspective of how am I communicating? What do I need to improve? So I think those are some really cool things out there that people haven't tapped into yet.
Yeah. And I love the ability for a third party to then observe, right? Because one of the things, and we all fall prey to this, right? Like, you kind of are doing the things that you know how to do, and you're doing them as effectively as you can. But they're not necessarily best practice. I know in manufacturing, like Toyota is famous for this, right? Where they would have observers where they would just watch what people are doing, and not to critique them, but to find, frankly, just better ways to do the work. And so if they were taking, 4 steps to get a wrench and they kept getting that same wrench, well, why don't we move that wrench to the toolbox that all they have to do is not even take a step, just reach out their arm, right? And so I think about things like that. And what's interesting in mining, right? Your individuals tend to be a little isolated, right? They're in heavy equipment. And so there isn't, I'll say there are people in the buddy seats during training and things like that, but they're not there all the time, right? And so
you don't get to experience everything either.
Yeah. And so you could kind of take this footage, and again, almost individual agnostic, you could take the learnings out of it. Hey, we're watching, this is the norm of how this is done, but this is the other way we could do it that's a little more either efficient, safe, really kind of any of the metrics or KPIs that you're trying to track on a daily basis as an operator. Yeah. Shoot, I think that's interesting, the body cam concept, because I think that makes it a little more personal, right? Versus like a camera on the piece of equipment, or even in the piece of equipment, like in the cab.
When you think about some of the feedback that you get from the field, right? You don't understand how hard it is. I tried my best, or you don't know what I know. Come and live a day in my shoes, right? Those are feedback you get all the time. And I thought this technology is a cool way to kind of take the ego out of the decision-making process, where now you're just treating the elements at play as data or as just information. To your point, as far as the wrench being close, like I know we did a study. So one of my last projects that I did underground, we did a study where the shotcreting process, we were expected X amount of bags being shot per day, but for some reason we were kind of under delivering, and sometimes we were over delivering, and it didn't make sense what the variances were. So we literally just sat in a chair, watched it unfold with no coaching, no nothing, just kind of like, let's just play it as is, right? But it's a little bit stressful because now you got a person watching you and things like that. Whereas the camera, you'll just forget you're wearing it at one point. But we literally, all we did was move the machine 12 feet, move the bags over 5 feet, and then brought the water sprayers 7 feet back. All of a sudden, there was much less dust. It was quicker to put the bag on. They were much better off. They had much more visibility to the walls in the back. And then all of a sudden, they got almost 2 times more bags overnight.
Jeez.
And it was just like very minor, like your hoses should be here, the pump should be like, just like boop, 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 just little tweaks. So that's why that technology to me, it rang to me in the same fashion where like take the emotion out of it as far as like, Big Brother and all these things, like take that emotion out of it and just think systematically, what does it look like from an execution standpoint? And it's not to point fingers or anything else. It's just go here, go here, go here. And then all of a sudden you got exponential better results, right?
So if you layer that on with some of the other technologies that we're seeing, if I said like you had the body cam and there's a new one, I think it was through Amazon services where it's like there's a camera that can like detect anomalies. You could teach it or it could teach itself to detect anomalies. Well, if you start taking the body cam and this on top of it, you don't need to sit there and analyze the video either. It'll say that, there's something here you might want to go look at. Like if you take the classic job observation, it just ramped it up to a whole other level. And then if you take the probably the most exciting one that I've seen this week, just because I'm like, I really enjoy VR, and I think there's a future there for training and, you know, exposing people to the environment without being exposed to the environment. You know, you're taking people out of danger, and they get to live and learn in real time and in real conditions. And so one of the technologies this week was LiDAR, where it would take LiDAR using an iPhone, which was fantastic. Imagine that LiDAR unit was built into your body cam now. Everywhere you go, you're recording all this data, and you know, think automated vehicles and whatnot in the future, and get all those technologies converging. Man, like I can't imagine where we're going to be in, I don't know how long that will be, but like 10, 15 years.
Oh, and I don't even know if it'll be that long. I think there are companies out there, and obviously the OEMs are doing all their kind of, I'll say, both autonomy stuff, but also just augmentation stuff, right? How do we make sure we don't put this individual in an unsafe situation? Well, we can build some of that into the unit itself, right? And so I think there's a lot that's happening in this space. I think it's interesting, the body cam angle, because a lot of times in mining, we think equipment back. But one of the things that Turner believes in, and frankly, I think is some of the change we need to see just from a culture and kind of a shift perspective in the industry, you should think people back. And so, because they're the ones who are the experts, they're the ones who are doing the work every day. They're the ones who understand kind of the realities of what it takes. Yep. And that's why I like the body cam angle, because we're not just putting sensors on the machine, we're putting sensors on the person. And that person can likely give us a lot more context than that machine can. So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was even kind of going in my head, wow, if we had this sensing ability on the person, and they can now just start talking about the things that they're even seeing and observing, and all of that information is now collected. So instead of them having to come over the radio, you know, constantly and talk about this hazard or this thing that needs to get addressed or anything like that, they're just, you know, they're doing their role, and they're just kind of using the sensing ability as an augmentation to things they're already doing. I don't know. There's a lot there, I think, starting with the human. So that's encouraging to me.
Yeah. And it ties into, like, you know, like ourselves, like our group, what we're doing with the wearable biometric stuff. It's the same thing as what can people communicate without communicating anything, right? So we put sensors on equipment, we put heat gauges, we do all this stuff to make sure the equipment goes down. Meanwhile, the guy that has to operate is passed out in a corner because it's in a too hot environment. Like what's going on there? And to your point, I mean, I've been on so many projects where it's which equipment is running today, because the equipment is seen as the highest cost or the highest return that's required. So are all the pieces of equipment running today? Because if they need to be running in order to prove value of their existence, right? Like, well, okay, well, equipment running all over the place is one thing, but how does that tie into the work that's actually being executed to the greater goal? Right? You might be having equipment driving around all day and not advancing an inch.
Exactly.
Right? Whereas half the equipment could be parked and the other half equipment can be used. And then people are actually advancing the project in that sense. So that people back perspective, I completely echo that statement.
I think, and sorry, go ahead, Thomas.
No, it's okay, Eric. We all know the reality, right? I mean, if an individual is motivated and trained effectively, they are going to produce or just do their job more effectively than somebody else, right? And so why aren't we focused on the human? Why aren't we trying to make sure that they are motivated, comfortable, effective, given the tools that they need, et cetera, et cetera? Because I agree, guys, like pieces of equipment running, sure, they're expensive and they're big, but if they're not running effectively, that can oftentimes be more costly than them just not running at all. So, and again, that's back to the human thing, which is why why we focus so much on that. I mean, it makes sense. Keaton's famous for saying, we're not just a mining company, we're really a people company that does mining. right? Because if you get the right people on a team doing really any activity, as long as they're motivated, as long as they're resourced, as long as they're empowered to make the right decisions kind of in the moment, you will just see better results. You see it in football teams, whether that be Canadian, American, European, right? Like it doesn't matter. The team dynamic and the human beings that are actually doing this stuff so get overlooked in this space. And so that's why I love that you're choosing technology that is actually human focused rather than machine focused.
Right. I mean, one of the biggest favors, I had a conversation just recently, actually, because we had a service, we had a contractor come in and do some work for us. And they said, my God, like it went so smoothly and it was so frictionless. And I said, well, I don't want to be the bottleneck. Plus, we've also hired you because we didn't know how to do this. The biggest thing we can do is just get out of the way. And it got done quicker, cheaper, and more effectively than we probably would have. And the handover was much more effective as well because we didn't have that. We didn't get to suffer the pains of the transition. We just got, this is where we are. This is where we want to be. Show us when it's done. And then even though we're in the loop for progress, it was just like a no impedance, perspective from it. And they're like, this was probably one of the fastest projects we banged out for this magnitude. And, it was all about just how we just empowered the people on the project to perform the way that we hired them to perform in the first place. So,
and that's a win for you guys. And that's a win for them.
Absolutely.
Right. That's the other thing. Like oftentimes people don't necessarily see the kind of direct alignment, but there is. I mean, when you can get the right team of people going after something and you don't put a ton of obstacles in their way, I mean, oftentimes that is the best mutual result or holistic result. It's not win-lose. You can create win-win. And I think, again, back to the leadership thing, it's on the leaders in your organization to go do that. Because when you can create win-win, it's just such a better result. The ripples are all positive. And then we've all been in situations where that's not the case, right? Where it's viewed as win-lose and the ripples are always negative. It's just something, again, it's that shift that we believe is critical for the industry going forward. And I know you guys do too, because you talk about it, which, by the way, just giving voice to it, I think is something that wasn't necessarily being done a decade plus ago. So I love the topic.
Oh, thanks a lot for that feedback. And I mean, one of our missions right from the start was we encountered a lot of these conversations from a technical perspective, where it's like, this is how you do, this is how change is done. These are the steps you take. And it's very technical. And a lot of times we just get lost in that. And we realize that there's the academic process that could occur. And then there's a real process that occurs every day. So the more that we can have these open and transparent conversations, the more I think our audience will be appreciative of this is what actually happens. We talked about successes. We talked about failures. I mean, you cannot succeed without failing. For anybody that says like, I'm going to just wait and I'm going to do it perfect, you're going to be waiting until your days are over because you're just not going to get it perfectly. And the funny part is that when you come to terms with that imperfection and realizing that I am not afraid of that thing to fail, I will learn from it and then eventually it will succeed. You then see things unfold that you never saw possibly unfolding before because you let that creative process just kind of unfold on its as it went with the proper coaching and mentoring, of course. But it's in my view it's probably a little bit less technical than we like to think it is.
Yep.
We talked about in episode 1 where it changes every day.
Yeah. And I think that's also, again, some of the shift. Right. We have a lot of very technical individuals in this industry, right? Whether they be engineers, mechanics, operators, they all think very technically. What can I get out of this machine? How can I set this up such that I'm more efficient? And that's important. We have to do that. But that's why I like using the manufacturing example. where they're actually looking at the human experience. What is this person doing? How can I center and focus on them and optimize that to get a different result? Gosh, you talked about the filling bags example. I mean, there's just, I think when you start to look at the human, you start to uncover a lot of things that might not be necessarily apparent when you're just looking at it academically or technically. I know they do this also a lot in healthcare, both from the patient perspective, but also from the provider perspective. And so I think there's a lot of lessons we can take from these other industries where they make it human focused and then try to create the right technologies, systems, processes that can then make it better for that human, which drives a better result. Back to the win-win concept.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, guys, I know we made a promise earlier that we wouldn't drag this on. Not that we're dragging it on. This awesome conversation. I think we, like I could all the time, is just get caught up in it and go for the day. But I'd like to thank you, Thomas, for taking the time to speak with us today. Really appreciate it. It was awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you, guys. Gosh, I love everything that you're doing, Eric. Obviously, what you're doing at your firm kind of goes before me saying anything. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And this is a fun one. I would love to do it again. You guys tell me when.
Right on.
We'll do. Thanks a lot, Thomas.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Thomas. Thanks, Gus.
Well, there you go, Eric. Episode number 2 in the books again. Hope the audience and the people that are consuming this content really enjoy it. And yeah, another one in the books. Thanks a lot, Eric.
Right on. Thank you. See you later.